Hello, Director Coulson. I wanted to thank you for the loan of the flying car. I was the hit of the drive-in. Also, thank you for sending Agent May to the Chicago office. Who would have thought Agent Carter would travel forward in time and the three of us would have to team up for the adventure we've codenamed The Wizard's World? Of course, it goes without saying that the three of us teamed up for a different sort of three-way later that night. Three-way Monopoly. And I lost. Well, you asked me to fill you in on the newest Ghost Rider, Robbie Reyes. Well, I was only able to observe him in an alternate reality created during the most recent event called The Secret Wars. Hey, why do we keep reusing the same codenames over and over again here? I mean, at least the people who ran World War II added that 2 at the end to shake things up a bit. Yeah, but I'm getting off track. Doom recreated reality in his image, and I got sorted into the Battleworld containing the Colosseum. It is a shame that when things got sorted, not everyone made it back. Gee, I sure do miss the Fantastic Four and X-Men. At least Spider-Man's back at. And have you seen Aunt May? Anyway, I sure hope teaming up with a part-time S.H.I.E.L.D. agent and full-time comic book reviewer doesn't hurt your career, Director Coulson. Love. Signing off, Agent Last Angry Geek. Oh, P.S. Still nothing sinister from Mr. N.C. How much longer do I have to watch him? I mean, maybe that time he conquered that small nation in Reno was just a fluke. Oh, P.P.S. Enjoy the show. Hi everyone, and welcome back to Comic Book Issues. I'm your host, the Last Angry Geek. I know, you don't recognize me. New glasses. If there's one thing this show prides itself on being, it's timely. With that in mind, today we're reviewing Battleworld, Ghost Racers, an 18-month-old miniseries featuring a bunch of characters I'm not overly familiar with. Patreon. But just what is Battleworld? Battleworld was the catch-all banner under which a plethora of new miniseries appeared during the Secret Wars event. Reality had been rewritten under Dr. Doom and patrolled by a corps of Thors from every reality. Some of the books were continuations of stories from previous alternate realities, or continuations of previously wrapped events. Some were good, and some were bad. And some were bonkers original, which leads us to Ghost Racers. There have been quite a few Ghost Riders over the years. My personal history goes back with them quite a ways, actually. I was in the hospital once, nothing serious. And my dad brought me a bunch of comic books, one of which was the final issue of the original Ghost Rider, where Johnny Blaze rid himself of the spirit of vengeance. At least temporarily. I'm probably most familiar with the 90s Ghost Rider Dan Ketch, but recently we had a female Ghost Rider, Alejandra, and now one who doesn't ride a motorcycle, but rather a hot rod, Robbie Reyes, who, Marvel has announced, will be a character in the next season of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. So what do you do with 4 or even more Ghost Riders? Put them on a racetrack and fill it with death traps. Written by Felipe Smith and drawn by Juan Gideon, this is Battleworld, Ghost Racers, issues 1 through 4. Ghost Racers issue 1 opens with a family taking their seats at the Colosseum, the entertainment capital of Doomstadt. A huge chant breaks out for Robbie, who, as he enters his hot rod, promises to win for Gabe. Arcade welcomes his audience as fire begins to ignite in the racing stalls. The flames reach their crescendo as the race begins, and the Ghost Racers hit the track, or, as they are better known, the Spirits of Ignition. Danny Ketch tries to take out Reyes, only to be shot by the Nicolas Cage-esque Johnny Blaze. The original Phantom Racer, Carter Slade, opens fire from his Cyber Centaur form, and Alejandra Jones, the more recent female Ghost Rider, holds back, waiting for her moment. Reyes hits the brakes, taking out Slade, who falls back onto Blaze. Jones activates her afterburner, pulling ahead of Reyes. However, one of the Colosseum's death traps shoots her and gives Reyes the win. As he celebrates, Robbie tells a disembodied voice named Eli that was too close. Eli disagrees. A win is a win. The other riders are de-ghosted, and a riot squad begins to violently subdue Blaze and Ketch. As Robbie is congratulated for the most consecutive wins, Danny screams that he'll get his. None of them can escape this curse. I know all too well how terrible curses can be. I remember this one time I accidentally ran over that gypsy woman, and then her father cursed me by saying thinner. I have to eat copious amounts of ice cream, soda, and cheese to keep from wasting away.
I no say thinner, I say failure.
Oh, well, then it never came true. Wait. At a club, Robbie blows off his fans to spend a few more minutes with his little brother, Gabriel, watching the race highlights. MODOKs, symbiotes, sentinels, mutants, all have fallen to Robbie. Robbie is clearly Gabe's hero. They celebrate even as the other Ghost Racers are tortured by Arcade and his subservient angel, Zadkiel. Arcade receives the news that the gambling odds favoring Robbie have never been higher. He decides the time to strike is now because Robbie is going to lose his next race. Gabe asks if Robbie will be able to stop racing when he retires. Robbie hems and haws, but Gabe's heard rumors about what happens to the losing racers. And it's Gabe's fault that Robbie is in this mess. In a flashback, the brothers are sitting on a stoop during a hot summer. Gabe wants an air conditioner, but Robbie would rather have the fancy car he just saw. They're joined by some friends as some girls pass by. Robbie makes eyes with a redhead, and his friends encourage him to talk to her. Gabe cracks open a fire plug and sprays water everywhere. The neighborhood begins to celebrate. It's then that one of Doom's sentinels shows up. Gabe has broken Doom's law, and it moves to arrest him. Robbie tries to take the blame, but when scanned, the robot detects an igniter spirit in him. A pair of Thors disperse the crowd, and Robbie and his friends are thrown in jail as Gabe watches helplessly. In the Coliseum dungeons, Zadkiel can sense that the source of Robbie's powers are different from the other Ignition spirits, but Arcade only cares that Robbie can race. He's thrown in a cage with other prisoners, Danny, Alejandra, and 2 others, Zero, the Ghost Rider of 2099, and Knuckles O'Shaughnessy, who Alejandra calls the worst ghost racer in history. Not technically true. She's forgetting about Mickles the Pickle Wash. He actually won 7 of his 9 races. Oh, the reason he was the worst ghost rider in history is he never actually died. They're a bit of a stickler on that point. He would just set his hair on fire before each race. You can imagine the smell. In a garage presented with the armored Charger he'll be driving, he hears a voice telling him to get in. It's his igniter spirit, Eli, the source of his powers. As the racing siren begins to sound, Robbie's head begins to heat up. Robbie ignites, turning into a ghost racer, and takes off down the tracks with the other spirits. Alejandro wins that first race, and the rest are again depowered by Zadkiel and taken away. He and the other racers are burned, shot, and even doused in acid. This is motivation to win, and Eli promises if Robbie makes sure that they win, then he'll break them out of this life. Back at the party, Gabe wonders what happened to Robbie's friends who were arrested that day. Robbie's not sure whatever happened to them. Arcade, meanwhile, places all of his winnings on Rhea's to lose. A huge long shot. Except that he then orders Zadkiel to make sure Robbie's powers fail before he wins the next race. He will, but also admits that since Robbie's powers are different, he's becoming harder to control. The next race begins with Robbie again taking the lead, but there's a mutoid on the track, and he's horrified to see it's composed of his long-missing friends. Robbie barely avoids them before they're blown to smithereens by one of the death traps. Devastated, he calls on Eli to free them as the Venus Compiler, a killer android, is released onto the track to kill Robbie. Eli has Robbie keep driving straight as a Hellfire portal opens in front of them, and Robbie drives out of the Coliseum. Zadkiel can no longer sense Robbie, and worried that he'll forfeit his bet, Arcade orders the Angel to do something. Zadkiel supercharges the other igniters and sends them after the rogue racer. At their apartment, Gabe watches as Robbie disappears from the track. Robbie shoots out into reverse traffic. He avoids becoming street pizza and pulls into an alley. He asks Eli how he avoided Zadkiel's powers. Eli himself isn't sure. He just knows that he's not susceptible to the Angel's powers and could sense his moves in advance. It's why they kept winning. He's even able to change the car's appearance to hide from the Thors. Just as Robbie thinks they might get away with escaping, the other spirits arrive on his tail. They surround him, open fire with Alejandra crushing on top of him, and Slade flipping him over with a double kick. Ketch destroys the car as Robbie jumps out, and he barely avoids being squashed by a Ghost Rider gorilla. You may have noticed that some Ghost Racers go missing between issues and new ones show up. For instance, what happened to that little person ghost, O'Shaughnessy? Well, that's easy. Lord Arcade had an opening for a server on his barge, and he jumped at the chance. There, he met a very tall golden version of the Venus Compiler. One thing led to another, and now they're living in a civil union in Dr. Doom's version of Massachusetts. That's right. A homosexual midget ghost and pansexual android can find love in an alternate reality created by Marvel's greatest villain. Yet I ask a girl out and she maces me before kneeing me in the groin. So not everything changed in this new reality. They're not his enemies, but Alejandra says this is Lord Zadkiel's will. She rips off her mask and spits out a swarm of demonic insects on Robbie, but he deflects them back onto the other spirits with his Hellfire chain. They're kindred souls that Zadkiel and Arcade torture for sins they did not commit. Robbie depowers, begging them to fight Zadkiel, not him. Slade grabs him and stares at him with his phantom gaze. But the Phantom Racer suddenly turns on the other spirits. Changing back into human form, he declares Robbie is not their enemy. His powers are different from theirs, but his soul is pure. The other racers turn human, or a reasonable facsimile thereof, and remember the good lives they used to live. They let Robbie leave, but moments later Zadkiel's giant head appears, repowers them, and returns them to the Coliseum. He tortures the rebellious spirits, but is somewhat surprised that Arcade isn't madder. Arcade knows he's still in control. Robbie finally gets home only to find that Gabe is not in his room or at his neighbor's. But a broadcast by Arcade tells Robbie where Gabe is, at the Coliseum, about to compete in his first race. It's hard to say what shocks Robbie more, the fact that Gabe is an igniter spirit, or that he's driving General Grievous's old bike. Terrified as the other racers taunt him, the alarms start and Gabe is thrown headfirst into the race. He manages to avoid attacks by Ketch and even a fire-breathing T-Rex on a jet engine. It's then another portal opens, and Robbie slides into the arena, cutting off the other racers. The crowd cheers for the returning Robbie, who reunites with his brother. But before he can give Gabe instructions, the T-Rex seems to swallow Robbie whole. But it turns out Eli teleported them out. He wants to take the brothers and run, but Robbie decides it's time to stand their ground. As long as Zadkiel is there, they'll never be free. As the spirits of ignition, they are the only ones who will look out for their fellow riders. Arcade releases the Vetus compiler and it swats away the other racers, heading for the Reyes brothers. He lets Gabe run, even as Zadkiel warns Arcade he's lost control of Robbie. But Arcade can control Robbie so long as he's got Gabe under his thumb. He turns control of the car over to Eli and wraps up Slade with his chain. He jumps on his back, ripping off the mask and gazing into his eyes in order to break the Angel's hold on him. The compiler is about to kill Gabe when it's smashed by Ketch and Blaze, with Alejandra driving a laser through it. Carter calls to the spirits to stand together. Arcade tries to pacify the confused crowd, but is clearly disturbed by this situation. Just as Gabe is about to win the race, Zadkiel comes swooping down and grabs the young boy. The crowd begins to get upset at the threat to Gabe. This upsets Zadkiel, who demands the crowd's obedience, even as the more monstrous members of the audience cheer him on. The Dark Angel makes it clear Gabe is going to suffer for their defiance. He's sorry, but Robbie tells him he's got nothing to apologize for. The two switch places, presumably at Eli's doing, and Robbie lights up, draining the Angel's soul from his body as an empty suit of armor falls to the ground. Slade announces the races are over and the Ghost Racers will never again be subjugated. He unleashes his penitent stare into the audience, and the guilty feel torment, including the violent mutants from earlier. The racers use their Hellfire chains to jerk Arcade off his flying platform. Alejandra catches him and reminds him she promised to rip out his eyes before she killed him. She gouges them out, and a portal opens behind him. The Ignition spirits depart the arena, literally over Arcade's dead body. With Gabe at his side, Robbie leads the other Ghost Racers through the portal. Unleashed on Doom's world, they are racers no more. They are the spirits of vengeance. In the spirit of movies like Death Race and the Mad Max films, this was a fun little miniseries. But it didn't work as a Ghost Rider book, or did the spirit of inadequacy curse this book to failure? Let's take a closer look at these 4 issues. Well, the best thing going for the story is that it's simple. It doesn't require you to know anything about the current Ghost Rider, but then it doesn't explain anything about the current Ghost Rider either. So if you're hoping for answers as to who Eli is and why Robbie's powers are different from the previous Ghost Riders, you're out of luck. Like I said, it's a simple story. Guy gets recruited into Death Race. Lose and you're tortured, win and you've got a great life. Guy wins race to make life better for his family, but then things go wrong, so Guy has to topple unfair establishment that set him and his family up to fail. It's a story as old as time itself. We never really get into Robbie's head or that of the other Ghost Riders or Ghost Racers in this story. So you can just pick it up, you'll get enough of the background to understand what's going on, and then just enjoy the story without ever feeling too lost. So in that respect, the story by Felipe Smith works. There are story beats we hit in every issue that keep it moving along, so we're never bored, but I'm glad this was only 4 issues. Any more would have stretched the concept a bit too thin. Where it fails is that it doesn't really draw me into the world of the Ghost Racers, and so I don't really have any desire to read the ongoing series before or after this book. The art by Juan Gideon is simple, but effective. I think he's almost better at designing characters than drawing them. He has a style that's low in details, and that's a shame when you've got things like T-Rexes on planes and a coliseum full of death traps and monsters. You want to enjoy the weirdness as much as you can. I'm a bit torn on this art style, but it does create a fun atmosphere for this title that can get pretty dark at times with the torturing and violence. Ultimately, this style works for the title.
Gaze into my raging stare and know that I give this comic book, Ghost Racers 1 through 4, 3.5 out of 5 stars.
Oh, man. Deep voice, eye stars, I am fighting something. Anyway, this is a surprisingly fun read amidst a flurry of inconsequential money grab miniseries. Battleworld was a mess, but Ghost Racers was fun, but it never really engaged me with the characters. Knowing that, I must now stalk the comic books for my next subject to review. This is Comic Book Issues, and I'm your host, the Last Angry Geek.